My wife's parents, Arthur and Beatrice, slipped something peculiar into my drink when they thought I wasn't looking. A special concoction for my favorite son-in-law, Beatrice chirped, a saccharine smile plastered on her face. I offered my thanks and subtly swapped glasses with Arthur, a man whose constant criticism of my profession grated on my nerves. 45 minutes later, the scene played out. My name is Julian Mercer, a 35-year-old freelance photographer residing in the vibrant city of Charleston, South Carolina. I built my business from the ground up, specializing in a range of subjects: weddings, wildlife, and high-end magazine features. The work provided a comfortable living, provided I was skillful, and I was. But in the eyes of my in-laws, especially Beatrice, my achievements were perpetually insufficient. "How's that little photography hobby coming along?" Arthur would inquire at family gatherings, barely masking his disdain. He was a high-powered corporate lawyer, a man who gauged success by the square footage of his home and the size of his investment portfolio. Each Sunday dinner at their opulent estate was a predictable ordeal. Beatrice would lavish attention on our daughter, while Arthur subjected me to a grilling about my financial standing. My wife, Isabel, would discreetly squeeze my hand under the table, a silent apology for her parents' behavior. I'd spent the preceding week on an assignment in Wyoming, battling knee-deep snow to capture breathtaking images of wild bison for National Geographic. I was utterly exhausted, yet Isabel insisted we couldn't miss Beatrice's milestone birthday celebration. Just a couple of hours, she'd promised. I should have heeded the unease that coiled in my gut when Beatrice cornered me in the kitchen, her eyes darting nervously before she presented me with that drink, a slight tremor betraying her hand as she declared, "I've prepared something special, just for you." Something felt amiss. I couldn't anticipate just how drastically wrong things were about to become. Isabel and I met 7 years ago at an art showcase where my work was displayed. She was pursuing a doctorate in marine biology, and I was beginning to gain recognition in the field. We connected immediately. She understood my compulsion to capture the world through my lens, and I admired her fervent dedication to preserving it. Her parents, however, presented a different challenge. From our first encounter, Arthur made it abundantly clear that he'd envisioned a different kind of partner for his daughter. Someone with a stable 9-to-5 job, a substantial retirement fund, a company car. Someone precisely like him. Beatrice was more subtle in her disapproval. She'd compliment my photographs while simultaneously inquiring about my plans to embark on a more stable career. She'd invite me to family functions, then introduce me as the photographer instead of her son-in-law. For years I attempted to earn their approval. I brought expensive wines to their gatherings, showcased my published work, and mentioned high-profile clients. Nothing altered their perception of me as a transient figure in Isabel's life, a fleeting phase she'd eventually outgrow. Last Christmas, I overheard Beatrice on a phone call. Isabel could have married Timothy, a renowned plastic surgeon from a wealthy family, but she chose the creative type. The slight pause before creative made it sound like a contagious disease. Arthur was far more forthright. When Isabel and I announced we were expecting a child, he pulled me aside. "Children are expensive, my boy," he declared. "Perhaps you should secure more reliable employment before bringing a child into the world." I never shared these incidents with Isabel. She loved her parents despite their flaws, and I didn't want to force her into an agonizing choice. Therefore, I maintained a facade of cordiality, offering firm handshakes to Arthur, complimenting Beatrice's culinary efforts, and keeping my true feelings to myself. However, there were warning signs I should have addressed more seriously. Beatrice's habit of summoning Isabel to the kitchen whenever I discussed a successful project, her seemingly accidental exclusion of me from family photographs, the occasion when Arthur suggested therapy for Isabel's impulsive decisions while staring directly at me. I dismissed it all, believing time would eventually bring acceptance. I was mistaken. The Friday of Beatrice's birthday dinner, I returned from Wyoming with wind-chapped cheeks and a memory card overflowing with images that would cover our mortgage for several months. I was bone-tired, but I showered, donned a crisp shirt, and drove us to their palatial residence in the most exclusive part of town. The dinner began conventionally. Arthur boasted about a recent legal victory. Beatrice fussed over the elaborate table settings. Isabel's brother Richard and his wife Charlotte engaged in polite conversation. I nursed a beer, counting down the minutes until we could depart. After the main course, Beatrice announced she'd prepared her renowned sangria for dessert. She vanished into the kitchen, and I offered to assist with carrying the glasses. That's when I observed it. 2 glasses were set apart from the rest. As I entered, she swiftly added something from a small vial into one of them. It wasn't a garnish or a flavoring agent. It was colorless and odorless. She concealed the vial the moment she heard my footsteps. "Oh, Julian," she exclaimed, a little too enthusiastically. "I've got this. This one's for you. A special recipe for my favorite son-in-law." My throat constricted. The glass held a barely visible film floating on the surface, catching the light. "Allow me to help you," I offered, taking both glasses. In the dining room, Arthur was engrossed in his phone, barely glancing up as I approached.
"Sangria, sir?"
I said, strategically placing the tampered glass in front of him. I then made an excuse about preferring water with my dessert. My mother-in-law had attempted to poison me, and she was aware that I knew. I didn't react, didn't confront her, simply savored my chocolate cake while Isabel rushed to her father's side. Amidst the ensuing chaos, with Arthur insisting it must have been food poisoning and Beatrice stammering about tainted seafood, I discreetly pocketed the untouched glass intended for me. Something had shifted within me. The anger I felt wasn't fiery or impulsive. It was cold, calculated. I wasn't going to let this go unchallenged, but I wouldn't engage in their style of conflict. I would force them to confront their true selves. The following Monday, I took the glass to Marcus, a former client who managed a toxicology laboratory. "Personal or professional?" he inquired when I explained my request. "Family matter," I replied. 3 days later he called. "Julian, the drink contained benzodiazepines. Nothing lethal, but enough to incapacitate someone for hours, possibly causing memory impairment. Where did you obtain this?" I thanked him and requested a written report, leaving his question unanswered. That evening, I informed Isabel that I needed to take a break from Sunday dinners, citing the need to focus on an upcoming exhibition. She was disappointed, but understanding. I didn't reveal the test results. Not yet. I needed more evidence. Over the next 2 weeks I conducted a thorough investigation. Beatrice had prescriptions for Xanax from 3 different physicians. She'd been exceeding the prescribed dosage for years. There were also unsettling rumors circulating about her: strange behavior at a neighbor's gathering, accusations of theft at her exclusive country club, stories her family had diligently suppressed. I compiled all the evidence and bided my time. My opportunity arose when Isabel mentioned that Beatrice required photographs for a social media profile. "She specifically requested you," Isabel said, surprised by the request. I agreed. The following Saturday, I arrived at their house alone, my camera bag in one hand, a sealed envelope in the other. Beatrice was awaiting me. Expensively dressed and impeccably made up. "Arthur is at the office," she explained. "Before we commence," I stated calmly, "I thought you might want to review this." I handed her the envelope, containing the toxicology report, along with printouts of her multiple prescriptions. Her hands trembled as she read. "This is preposterous," she whispered. "I would never—" "We both know what transpired," I interrupted. "What I don't understand is why." Her expression hardened. "You're not good enough for my daughter. You never will be. A man should provide security, not pictures. And drugging your daughter's husband provides security," I countered, maintaining a steady tone. "It wasn't intended to harm you," she retorted. "Just to incapacitate you. To make you miss that ridiculous gallery opening you've been discussing for months. To demonstrate to Isabel that you're unreliable." I allowed her words to sink in. The lab report, the prescriptions, even the increasingly hostile text messages from her mother over the years. "My mother wouldn't do this," she insisted. But her voice lacked conviction. The following day she confronted her parents. I wasn't present, but when she returned home, her eyes were swollen from crying. "My father claims it's all a misunderstanding," she murmured, "that you're attempting to create discord between us because you're insecure about your career." I simply nodded. I'd anticipated this response. "What do you think?" I asked. She didn't reply, merely retreated into bed and turned her back on me. I'd fought back, but somehow I'd fallen deeper into their trap. Now I was the villain in their narrative, and they'd successfully planted doubt in the one person whose opinion mattered most to me. For 2 weeks, Isabel barely spoke to me. She visited her parents alone, returning with red, tear-filled eyes and renewed skepticism. I immersed myself in my work, spending countless hours in my studio, patiently waiting for the storm to subside. Then a package arrived, bearing no return address, only my name scrawled across the top in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a USB drive and a note. "You should see this. Charlotte, Richard's wife." The drive contained video files, home security footage from Arthur and Beatrice's residence. The timestamps corresponded to the night of the dinner. There was Beatrice in the kitchen, clearly adding something to a drink. There was me entering, taking the glasses. There was Arthur drinking from the tampered glass. But there was more. Footage from after we left, Beatrice screaming at Arthur, blaming him for drinking from the wrong glass. Arthur yelling back, "This isn't the first time you've done something like this." I watched the footage 3 times, struggling to process what I was witnessing. Not only confirmation of Beatrice's actions, but evidence of a recurring pattern, evidence that Arthur was complicit. The next file was from 2 days after the dinner. Beatrice and Arthur argued in their living room about me. "He knows what you did," Arthur said. "So what?" Beatrice retorted. "It's his word against ours. Isabel will never choose him over family. And if she does, then she's not the daughter I raised," Beatrice stated coldly. "Don't worry, I've already begun sowing seeds of discord. By the time I'm finished, she'll be filing for divorce and believing it was her idea." I closed my laptop, my hands trembling. This wasn't solely about me. This was a calculated attempt to control Isabel's life, to isolate her from anyone who didn't conform to their vision, and they'd been doing it for years. I immediately called Charlotte. "Why did you send this to me?" "Because they did the same thing to me when I married Richard," she said quietly. "They tried to break us up for 2 years, claiming I wasn't good enough. It almost succeeded." "Why didn't you tell us?" "Richard doesn't know," she confessed. He worships his father, believes everything he says. I tried to tell him, but he thinks I'm paranoid. I simply couldn't bear to watch them do this to someone else." The next day I received a text from Arthur. "We should talk man to man. No wives." I met him at his exclusive golf club. He was waiting in a private room, sipping bourbon. "Julian," he began, "families are complex. My wife, she can be difficult, overprotective, but she means well. Drugging someone constitutes meaning well," I challenged. He waved his hand dismissively. "A misunderstanding. Beatrice takes medication for anxiety. She likely confused the glasses. I have the security footage, Arthur." His expression shifted instantly, hardening into something cold and calculating. "What do you want? Money? Is that what this is about? I always suspected you married Isabel for financial reasons." "I want you both to leave us alone," I stated plainly. "Stop trying to convince Isabel that I'm inadequate. Stop interfering in our marriage." Arthur leaned forward. "You believe this is the first time we've dealt with someone like you? People who seek to exploit our family." He chuckled. "Isabel will return home where she belongs. She always does. Ask her about Daniel. Ask her about her fiancé before you." I felt a chill. "What are you talking about? Isabel was engaged before she met you." "A fine young man. A physician. We didn't approve of his background. It took us 6 months to convince her he was unsuitable. She broke it off. Came home crying to Daddy." He smirked. "History repeats itself, son." On the drive home, I contacted Isabel's college roommate Deborah, and inquired about Daniel. "Oh God," she exclaimed. "That was dreadful. He was perfect for her. But her parents, they convinced her he was unfaithful, planted evidence. He attempted to tell her the truth, but by then she no longer trusted him." The pattern was now evident. This wasn't just about me, it was about control. Complete control over their daughter's life. And they'd done it before. I didn't confront Isabel immediately. Instead, I began amassing every piece of evidence I could find. I contacted Daniel, who was initially hesitant to speak with me. Once I explained the situation, he provided me with old emails between him and Isabel, revealing how her parents had systematically sabotaged their relationship. I contacted other former boyfriends, past friends of Isabel's who had inexplicably vanished from her life. A pattern emerged. Anyone who encouraged Isabel's independence was gradually eliminated from her life. Charlotte provided more security footage, capturing Diane and Gerald discussing their plans for us. "Once they divorce, we'll persuade her to move back home." Arthur stated in one clip, "She can manage the family foundation. Meet suitable men." I compiled everything onto a single drive. Then I invited Richard and Charlotte to dinner, without informing Isabel of my intention to shatter her family's carefully constructed image. Over dessert, I connected my laptop to our television. "There's something you both need to see," I announced. For the next hour, we watched the footage together. Isabel sat immobile, her face ashen. Richard kept shaking his head, muttering, "Those aren't my parents," under his breath. When it was over, Isabel turned to me, tears streaming down her face. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I needed you to witness it for yourself," I replied. "Everything, not just what they did to me, but what they've been doing to you your entire life. Richard stood up, furious. This is garbage. You've manipulated these videos. My parents wouldn't do this. Charlotte touched his arm. They did it to us too, Richard. Why do you think they suddenly became fond of me after we had William? Because a grandchild gave them leverage. The color drained from Richard's face. You never told me. I tried, she whispered. You wouldn't listen. Later that night, Isabel crawled into bed beside me. I need time to process this, she said softly. But I believe you, and I'm sorry I doubted you. The next morning, Beatrice called. Isabel put her on speakerphone. Darling, I was hoping you'd consider staying with us for a while, Beatrice said cheerfully. Your father and I are concerned about you. Marriage is challenging, and sometimes separation can offer clarity. Mom, Isabel interrupted. I've seen the videos. Silence. Then what videos? The security footage of you drugging Julian's drink. Of you and Dad plotting to break up my marriage. Another pause. Isabel, whatever he's shown you has been fabricated. You know Julian has always been envious of our family. Stop. Isabel's voice was firm. We're coming over tonight. All of us. Richard, Charlotte, Julian, and me. We're going to discuss this as a family. No more lies. After she hung up, Isabel turned to me. They'll deny everything. They'll attempt to shift the blame onto you. I nodded. I know. So what's our plan? For the first time in weeks, I smiled. I believe it's time your parents met the real me, the one who not only takes photographs, but also knows how to tell a compelling story. That night, we arrived at Arthur and Beatrice's residence with my camera equipment. Richard and Charlotte were already there, sitting rigidly in the living room. Arthur seemed confident. I understand there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, I interrupted, setting up my tripod. I'm documenting this conversation for the family archives. Beatrice immediately objected. This is private family business. Precisely. I agreed. Family business. And I'm family, even though you've made a considerable effort to alter that. For the next 2 hours we laid everything out. The drink. The manipulation. Daniel. The other former boyfriends. The pattern that had shaped Isabel's and Richard's entire lives. Arthur and Beatrice denied everything, of course, labeling me unstable and manipulative. But with each denial, I played another clip, displayed another email. Their faces grew paler, their denials weaker. Finally, Isabel stood up. I love you both. You're my parents. But your actions are unforgivable. You no longer control my life. Richard nodded. We're adults. We choose our own partners, our own paths. Beatrice began to cry. Not from remorse, but from the realization that she was losing control. Arthur merely looked stunned, as if unable to comprehend that his children were defying him. As we prepared to depart, I handed Arthur a USB drive. This contains everything. The footage, the emails, the testimonies. It's yours to keep. What's that supposed to mean? He asked suspiciously. It means I'm not going to damage your reputation by sharing this with anyone else. That would hurt Isabel, and I would never do that. I paused. But if you ever attempt to interfere in our marriage again, if you ever try to manipulate Isabel or speak negatively about me, copies will be sent to every member of your country club, your business associates, and your precious social circle. For the first time since I'd met him, Arthur looked at me with something akin to respect. I underestimated you. Yes, I said simply. You did. 6 months passed. Isabel and Richard began therapy to address the harm their parents had inflicted. Arthur and Beatrice maintained their distance, sending occasional texts but respecting the boundaries we'd established. Then during the holidays, they invited us all to dinner. A fresh start, the invitation read. Isabel wanted to attend. They're still my parents, she said, and they're trying. I agreed, but I wasn't naive enough to believe they had genuinely changed. When we arrived, everything seemed normal. Beatrice had prepared a lavish feast. Arthur was charming, inquiring about my latest projects with what appeared to be genuine interest. After dinner, Arthur invited me to his study. I have a proposition for you, he said, pouring me a glass of scotch. I've been reflecting on your career. Photography has been rewarding for you. But have you considered diversifying? I could bring you into my firm junior partner track. The salary would be substantial. I took the glass but didn't drink. Why would you do that? Your family, he said smoothly, And I respect how you handled the unpleasantness. You protected my daughter while standing your ground. That's what a real man does. I set the glass down, untouched. I appreciate the offer, but no. His smile tightened. Julian, be reasonable. This is an olive branch, a way for us to move forward. No, I repeated. It's another attempt at control. You can't buy me, Arthur, and you can't tolerate the fact that Isabel loves me precisely as I am. Don't be foolish, he hissed, dropping the pretense. Everyone has a price. I stood up. That's where you're wrong, and that's why you'll never comprehend your daughter. I returned to the dining room where Beatrice was showing Isabel photo albums. Look at these, she was saying. You were so happy when you lived at home. Isabel caught my eye across the room. She could sense from my expression that something had transpired. I gave a slight nod, and she stood up. Mom, Dad, she announced clearly. I have something to tell you. Everyone turned to look at her. We're expecting a baby, Julian and I. I'm 3 months pregnant. The shock on their faces was genuine. Beatrice recovered first, rushing to embrace her daughter with tears in her eyes. Arthur approached more slowly, glancing between Isabel and me. Congratulations, he said stiffly. Thank you, I replied, then lowering my voice so only he could hear. This child will never be a pawn in your games. I promise you that. His face hardened, but he nodded once. He understood the message. As we drove home that night, Isabel squeezed my hand. They'll never change, will they? No, I said honestly. But they'll have to accept that we won't change. And sometimes that's enough. 3 weeks later, a registered letter arrived from Arthur's attorney. Inside was a deed to a house. Our house, which we'd been renting, and legal documents establishing a trust fund for our unborn child. There was no note, no conditions, no strings, just the transfer of assets, clean and irrevocable. It wasn't an apology. Arthur wasn't capable of that, but it was an acknowledgement, perhaps the only one he could offer, that we had prevailed. Our daughter was born in the summer. We named her Eleanor, after my grandmother. When Arthur and Beatrice came to the hospital, they brought gifts but maintained a respectful distance. They cooed over the baby, took photographs, and departed without offering unsolicited parenting advice or financial lectures. Months passed. Our relationship with them settled into something resembling normalcy. They never apologized for their actions, but they ceased trying to control Isabel's life or undermine my career. One evening, as I was editing photographs in my studio, Isabel entered carrying Eleanor. My mother called, she said. She wants us to visit for Christmas. I looked up from my computer. What do you want to do? I think we should go, she replied. But with conditions. We stay at a hotel, not their house. We leave when we choose to leave. No unsupervised time with Eleanor. I nodded. Sounds reasonable. She sat down beside me, gently bouncing the baby. You know, I used to believe success meant pleasing my parents, earning their approval, fulfilling their expectations. And now, she looked down at our daughter, then back at me. Now I understand it's about making choices I can be proud of, standing by the people I love. 2 weeks before Christmas, a large envelope arrived from Arthur. Inside was a glossy brochure for his firm's annual report. My photographs were featured throughout: landscapes, portraits, architectural shots, the work I'd created on my own terms, without his interference. There was a brief note: hired the best photographer I know. Thought you'd want a copy. It wasn't forgiveness or reconciliation. It was something else. Respect, perhaps. The acknowledgement that I was successful on my own terms, not his. I didn't call to thank him. We both understood this wasn't about gratitude. It was about acknowledging the new boundaries, the new reality. That spring, I opened my own gallery in downtown Charleston. At the grand opening, Isabel stood beside me, Eleanor on her hip. My parents flew in from Oregon. Friends and clients filled the space, admiring the images I'd captured over the years. Arthur and Beatrice arrived toward the evening's end. They didn't linger. Beatrice briefly held Eleanor under Isabel's watchful gaze. Arthur shook my hand, nodded at the photographs with genuine approval, and departed without offering any suggestions on how I should manage my business. As we locked up that night, Isabel asked, "Do you believe they've changed?" I pondered the question carefully. "No," I said finally, "but they've accepted that they can't change us, and sometimes, that's sufficient." Later, as we sat on our porch watching the stars emerge over the ocean, Eleanor asleep in her crib upstairs, I realized something I'd never fully articulated before. I hadn't won by playing Arthur and Beatrice's game. I'd won by refusing to play it at all. I'd stood my ground, protected what mattered, and built my life according to my own definition of success. Not with schemes or manipulation, but with honesty and quiet perseverance. In the end, that was the most satisfying retribution of all, living well on my own terms, with the family I loved beside me.